Welcome to episode 36, and today is a special episode in that I might not necessarily be calling the shots because I'm joined today by Benny McDevitt. Benny, you're very welcome on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Micky. I'm excited for what the next hour or so might bring, yeah.
Benny is a sports psychologist and has very kindly agreed to share some of his knowledge and expertise in the field of sports psychology. I'm quite excited about where this is going to go and a wee bit scared because normally I ask the questions and I want to keep that format just for the beginning of the podcast. So before I hand it over to you, how did you get into this sports psychology, or where did your journey begin? I always like to have a wee poke around in people's journeys.
Yeah, feel free to go that way, Micky. I suppose to give a bit of a brief outline to where we got without boring you too much. I suppose I'm giving away my age now, but in around the mid-2000s I qualified through my sports degree, and shortly after 2008 I qualified as a personal trainer. I'm always interested in sport and coaching and competing, and I went and done my strength and conditioning, exercise referral. A course came up, I done it, I got qualified in it and worked in gyms, swimming pools and so on. But really enjoyed the elements of, say, personal training that included like behaviour change and mindset and goal setting. You know, I'm sort of laughing at goal setting, just thinking people, go here, goal setting, here we go again.
Yeah.
But it was always them elements of it. And, I worked in the industry for years. I'm a lecturer at the local college there, Southwest College, in sport and exercise science. And 5 or 6 years ago I got the opportunity to do my Masters, complete my Masters. So,
Class.
Yeah, so the Masters in Sport and Exercise Psychology, completed it part-time. And I was very excited by being able to go back to university, even though I'd been teaching at the university or higher education, because when I was at uni originally, I loved the typical student life, and we can talk about that another time in another podcast, but I felt that I didn't achieve my potential academically, but achieved maximal socialisation. That makes sense. So,
the life skills, maybe not so much.
Yes, I'm very much able to apply them still in the right context.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the sports psychology exercise masters, that I managed to come out of it with a first, and some of my research has actually been sent for publication. So
really?
That's not me bragging, by the way. That gave me a bit of self-belief that I could actually make an impact here and make a difference. It wasn't just me going and doing a masters because work were sending me on it. I actually wanted to do it. And I suppose after qualifying through that, Micky, is that you don't come out of that as a sports psychologist. You have to do your hours, you have to put in your case studies, and you have to work through the mentorship program. So I was very fortunate that a friend of mine, Kelly Fay, KF Performance, she gave me an opportunity to work with Swim Ireland, sort of straight away. So I got in there working with elite athletes and under Kelly's mentorship. Sometimes officially and unofficially, it could be a voice note on WhatsApp, the way we communicate, or it could be formally through workshops as well. So that kind of got the ball rolling, and it's kind of just spiraled from there. And the thing about sports psychology is that there's a lot of it sort of confidential, just due to the nature of it. But to give you an example of a few of the sports that I work with would be Swim Ireland, like I've mentioned. You've got GA, rugby, soccer, MMA, boxers, runners. Also, like some organisational behaviour work, and again, just the confidential nature of it. I've worked with people trying to get into the fire service. Some Marines actually. Through international work. And again, it's, you might think, well, what's a sports psychologist doing working with them? But it's being able to work under pressure. Build trust, deal with setbacks. Decision making. There's a lot of it can be applied to different fields. But I'm still very much learning at this game, but I very much enjoy it as well. So I think that gives a bit of an idea of where I'm at the minute. And I guess it's just kind of building up more of a portfolio and more of a case study of who I'm working with, and here I am now with an Ironman.
I don't know whether that's something that you need to be putting in your CV. I'm sure there's a few other guys listening to this that are much more advanced at triathlon, definitely, than I am. But I suppose that brings me on quite nicely to the idea of some people might think that sports psychology is something for elite athletes and is for these pro sports people. Is that the case, or is it something that could be accessed by me, for example, as an amateur sort of athlete, an age grouper in triathlon? So if I was to ring you up and say, look, I'm struggling with a certain aspect of my performance, are you the type of person I can ring and maybe get some help with?
Well, Micky, one of my overarching themes there is that I want to make sports psychology or mental skills training accessible to the everyday athlete. And no, that's not being disrespectful calling people an everyday athlete. What I mean by that is you could go on a social media platform and see an NBA player, NFL player, Premier League footballer, or Olympian, talking about the mental skills that they use, and they've perhaps used it for 10, 15 years and they've honed them skills. Now, that's not saying that someone couldn't go on a social media platform and use them skills, but from my experience, I find people that they try and dive into too much too soon. Mm-hmm. So it's about building up, say, the sets and reps like you would with your physical training. Mm-hmm. For example. Now, bringing that to the everyday athlete, they face sort of similar, whenever they compete in the sport, the similar challenges. But, a bit of a rhetorical question here maybe, but what's more challenging, getting paid £300,000 a week and playing football in front of millions, or working multiple jobs, raising a family? What's more challenging? Trying to structure your own training, manage your own injuries. What's more difficult there? They both present their own challenges. Mm-hmm. So there's different mental resistance challenges there, or different sort of mental challenges that people might face. But it's getting the right strategy in place for them to maximise the performance, I guess.
So it sounds like there's a certain level of flexibility and adaptable. You're quite adaptable, and you can create and formulate your structures and your supports around each individual person or team or group of people that you're working with. So you'll very much kind of make it fit whatever that situation demands. Is that fair enough?
That'd be fair enough to say, Micky. Yeah, but there's almost like a flow diagram that I would go through. If an athlete responds in this certain way, then we might go towards this type of intervention. But every sport's different, every athlete's different.
Yes.
But there's only so many interventions there really when you look at it. But it's about fine tuning and making it relevant to that athlete. Mm-hmm. Just to throw a few ideas out there, the amount of athletes that suffer from a lack of confidence, or self-doubt, or if there's a team there that's newly formed and there's no cohesion there, there's no trust. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the first step is really normalising that these things are real. There's a lacking, or there's a weakness, or there's a gap to be filled and enhanced. Yeah. And it's finding what the best strategy is to put in place for that athlete there and then.
It sounds like an obvious question, but what is sports psychology?
Obvious question, but it's you could type it into Google and get 15 different answers. I would always try and explain it as, if you thought of a sport psychology consultant, if you were to compare that as a running coach or a swim coach or your gym coach as your personal trainer, they would carry out some sort of assessment or baseline to see where you're at and then try and improve, whatever the skill is. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you needed to be able to run, you need to have certain leg strength. So we build up your leg strength. But I wouldn't know that just by looking at it. You would need to do some sort of assessment, some sort of consultancy. So, flip back to the mental skills. Here we are talking, having a consultancy. I can't assume just because you take part in triathlons or an Ironman that you suffer from this. I need to talk to you. I need to find out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem is not every athlete wants to do that either, so it's about building up a bit of rapport there and a bit of safety ground. And now this is a slightly different take on it today. You're recording, it's going out to your listeners, so fair play to that. But again, if it was to simplify the answer, which I'm not doing really well at here, is that a sports psychologist is basically a coach for your mental skills.
Yeah. And
whatever part of that mental skills is individual to you. Oh. So, for example, I could speak to an athlete and they freeze when it comes to competition. They could be the best trainers, but whenever it comes to the day of competition, it all changes.
Something not right.
Something changes. Yeah. Quite a lot of my work is people recovering from injury and also dealing with the setback of injury.
Mm-hmm.
A common one there, the GA word unfortunately is ACL injuries. Mm-hmm. I've been training so hard now, all of a sudden I have to sit out and watch my teammates go on. I'm going to miss my place in a squad. How do I deal with that? But then also you do your rehab and get back from that injury. How do you have the bravery to go back out and twist and turn and take impact? So it's just not a matter of building up your leg strength again. Again, that's just an example. Some of the recent work I've been doing, mm-hmm. And it's I don't know if I've answered that question, but it's pretty much a coach for your brain and identifying what areas that need to be worked on.
No, that makes sense to me. So building the strengths, identifying the weaknesses, and working somewhere in between in the greys of whatever that spectrum looks like.
Yeah, like your thoughts and your mindset and your brain and your head, they are separate from your body, but they work together. They work in sync, and they have a massive impact on each other. And the thing with mental skills or any of the sports psychology interventions, is that it almost needs to be treated the same as your physical training. Mm-hmm. First of all, starting out, what's your entry point? How are you starting off? For example, you don't start off by running a marathon.
No.
You learn to walk, learn to run, you do a 5K, do a half marathon, and you build it up. Same as the gym. If you join the gym, you're shown how to squat, without a weight. Then a weight's added and you build it up. And go back to a previous point, you've got people going on the internet and they're finding out about all these psychological interventions and they're diving in to do too deep of a water and they're going, that's not for me, that doesn't work. Whereas you need to start off at your entry point and build it up. Now the good thing is a lot of your mental skills training can be done anywhere. For example, we can visualise you being in the water, swimming.
Yeah.
Now, that sounds bizarre, but you can do the one swim. You can swim 1,000 lengths and not leave that chair. Yeah. You could be driving to work and thinking about what it would be like, running on that road.
Uh-huh.
You can practice your event without moving. Now, this is just an example of visualization or imagery. The more senses you can incorporate, which I mean like touch, feel, smell, seeing it and feeling it, the more effective it is. Mm-hmm. But if you can't get into the open water because of work schedule, family, lifestyle, you can lie in your bed, maybe have earplugs in, and picture yourself in the water and what it's like and practice every stroke. Because your brain can't actually tell the difference. If you get deep into that imagery and visualization, that can't tell the difference. You can practice your swimming. Now, your physical performance may not improve that much, but it's not going to be any worse.
I'll tell you what, I'm just going to interject here because this is a clinker. This is gold dust for some of the listeners and some of the previous guests, and it's one of the things that, particularly in triathlon, that's identified as a weak point, and that is the swim. And people have talked about their fear of open water, their fear of deep water, their inability to overcome cold water. When we're dealing with open water, we're dealing with waves, we're dealing with the wind, we're dealing with temperatures, all sorts of things. And the idea that we can train ourselves without going into the water it's a mind blower, but it's an absolute clinker. I'm really, really interested. I'm super impressed by that because I never thought about it like that. I try and explain how I do a swim, but I've never actually sat back and thought, how do I swim? Mm-hmm. And whenever I would, I'm now actually thinking about it in my head as I'm talking, and I know I can feel myself rolling over to the side, taking my breath, and it makes so much sense. If I can get myself trained in the mind before I go into the water, to be comfortable, to understand, to expect the unexpected, to anticipate a problem, to overcome whatever it is, then I'm in a much stronger place than. Am I right?
Just on that, there's so many angles we could go at here, Micky, and I'll try and cover them all. But for example, here, if you were to face some sort of adversity in the water, give me an example of what might happen during your swim.
So you might come up for a breath, for example, and you could get hit by a wee wave that might just swamp your mouth with water as you're taking a breath in, and would immediately put you off your rhythm. Your breathing is now out. It's a bit of a shock to the system. It's something unexpected.
Yeah. So you can imagine that happening. We could sit here now. You can close your eyes. We could recreate it. We could talk through what it's like to be in, preparing for the water, getting into the swim. Everything's going according to plan, and then woof, all of a sudden things aren't going according to plan.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that really took me back when I was learning about sports psychology. I always thought it was about making everything rosy, all perfect, all positive. But a massive part of it is accepting that things go wrong. Mm-hmm. Mistakes happen, I mean, again, something like a wave hitting you in the face isn't a mistake, but there's other things. You could have your changeover, something might happen there, for example, or you might get slowed down.
Yeah.
But the more you can picture and the more you can predict, if this goes wrong, this is what I'm going to do. And if you can, as I said, you can do that hundreds, thousands of times. And then when it does happen, and it may never happen, but if the moment like that does happen, it doesn't shock you. Because maybe I agree or disagree here. It's not necessarily what is happening that throws you off. It's your reaction to it.
Yes.
You're freaking out. Mm-hmm. You're panicking, and you can't make a clear decision.
Yeah.
And in preparation for this, Micky, I'm going off on a bit of a, not just off on a tangent here, I suppose. I do work with swimmers, but nobody to the length of the endurance that you would do. I was looking at it, and it might seem intimidating doing that amount of exercise and that length of a swim and that length of a, on the bike and a run. But it actually gives you so much opportunity to regulate your nervous system, especially if a mistake or something random happens. If you follow me, for example, if you were doing a 200 metre sprint or a 100 metre sprint in athletics, a mistake and you're gone. You don't have time to recover.
Yes, the margin for error.
The margin for error. So people might go. I'm not saying it's easy, but to flick the switch and make everything okay. But it just gives your nervous system such an opportunity to regulate again. So that's one thing I would say to you. I know we haven't really got into the meat of this yet, but there's a massive opportunity there to recover from a setback and multiple setbacks. Mm-hmm. And there's not going to be one competitor that doesn't face a setback of some. Now what they look like, you can't always predict. But you can use the ones from your memory and recency what they might look like, or if you talk to other athletes, so you can try and build up a bank of it. If you follow me, so
yes, I do indeed. I know that makes perfect sense.
So it's not just about thinking strong finish or strong swim. It's preparing for a worst case scenario, nearly.
It's kind of like you're kind of trying to cover all bases. Really, and hope that whenever any of the above happens, that you're prepared.
Well, that's it. I'm sure you have your kit all prepared. Your nutrition's on point. What's happening at this time. What's my pace. Everything will be taken into account. But people don't always. Well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if I get hit by a wave in the face and I lose my breath and I lose my rhythm? and then another swimmer hits me way, and
Yeah.
what am I going to do then? And the more you, as I said, the more you picture that, the more normal it is.
The thing that's springing to mind just when we were on open water was ahead of Ironman Cork 23. It was the aftermath of the storm, and the waves were very choppy. And I was chatting to my mate Jared, and I was saying, whenever we go in here, we're going to get tossed about like rag dolls. And the best way we can do this, and the best way for us for us to navigate this, is to pretend that we're kids and that we're at a fairground. So when the waves lift us up and throws us down, we go, yeehaw! We're riding these waves and we're having fun and it's exciting.
You've done that?
That's what I said to Jared.
That's brilliant.
Because it reminded me of the time whenever I was a child and been brought to Rossnila Beach, where the waves are always quite big in Rossnila. And we would crouch down in the water, and my dad would crouch down on one side, and maybe an uncle or whatever, one of the neighbours or whoever was with us back in the 70s. And they would wait to the very, very last minute to lift us up. We were only maybe 4 or 5 years of age, but you thought we were going to get nailed by this wave. But every time my dad would lift us way up, and we roared and laughed and kee-hooed, and the crack was brilliant. And that's where I got myself into, because I didn't want to go into. I wasn't going to go into the water, having invested so much time and made so much sacrifices to get beaten by a wave. When there was I was never going to beat the waves. Waves are going to win all the time, but I had to figure out how am I going to get through these waves without them beating me up. So that was how I did it. I said, let's just pretend that we're kids and we're having fun. We're getting thrown about, and this is like a fairground ride.
Yeah, Micky, that's great. As I said, that's brilliant to hear. I'll just sort of label that for you. A lot of athletes use mental skills without actually labeling them. You took a decision there to focus on what you can control.
Mm-hmm.
You really shouldn't focus on what you can't control. For example, you can't control the waves, but you were able to control your mindset and your approach to the waves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, my work here done. no, but that's very good. And sometimes just working as a sports psychologist is giving an athlete reassurance that they're doing the right things, and just a wee pat in the back saying, "Look, well done. That's a decision you made." Think of happy memories instead of going,
doom and gloom.
Doom and gloom and being scared and intimidated by these waves.
And you will kind of subconsciously bring that to the fore if you are going in thinking negatively and thinking doom and gloom, the self-fulfilling prophecy idea where you'll find all the things that are wrong and all the reasons why you shouldn't. That's a thing, isn't it?
Well, it is the thing, and again, just a few of my previous points, it's normalising it, and the more you say this out loud and the more you talk to other athletes or competitors, they're going through the same thing, but there's this bravado thing, especially males. No, didn't think like that.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you, but yeah, so no,
I'm not crying. My eyes are sweating.
Exactly. No, exactly. That's it. But I do think there's a bit of a shift in the culture that way. But a big part of that is sports psychology, and it's getting people to say things out loud, or at least write them. Mm-hmm. Write them down out loud. Sometimes I say, you might not always want to say it, but get it out of your mindset or out of your brain,
So what we're going to do today then, Benny, is I am going to, and I appreciate that, and you've already said it, that ordinarily you would get to know someone and you would build a relationship and you would build that rapport, and so we would be able to develop a trusting, working, professional relationship in order to move things forward. But for the purposes of the podcast, I'm the guinea pig. So I'm going to throw myself open to you for you to sort of go through the motions of what it would be like for someone if they were to avail of your services or another sports psychologist or whatever, to give us a sense of what it's like, what a consultation might look like. I'm going to say nothing. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
You might find that challenging, like you said. No, I jest. So just to be clear, and I suppose a bit of housekeeping on a consultancy like this would be, as a sports psychologist, I'm not here to diagnose ever. It's about gaining an understanding and you saying things out loud, me listening and trying to maybe find a bit of reason with that may not have the answers, and probably going to leave here with more questions, but food for thought. And as you mentioned there, look, this is just to give it a bit of a flavour, a bit of an idea of what a sports psychology consultancy might look like. Now, obviously, this is in person. I do these online as well. So this is good. Seeing people again, coming out around where the COVID's a timeline with people, but still, doing them online is still a thing, especially if it's out of reach international. So this is good. This is good. I'm enjoying this actually. So I guess it's just kind of getting a flow, and you maybe telling myself and the listeners a wee bit sort of what you're at currently with your training.
Okay, so well, at the minute I'm just coming out of what I would say is a slack period of training. My slack period of training looks like training for 16 days out of 30 instead of 30 out of 30. So my slack is I'm still training half the month. But I have been struggling for the last couple of months with just mentally struggling, and I don't know whether it was mental tiredness or physical tiredness or possibly a bit of both. But there was a period of uncertainty that I was going through that was impacting on my motivation, and I found myself thinking, what am I doing? Am I able to? Can I actually continue to do this at this level? And as much as I found myself trying to motivate others and keep myself motivating, I was struggling with my own motivation. I was finding myself making excuses and taking my eye off the ball and starting to slip. I've caught that, and I'm refocused now. I'm gonna do Ironman Lanzarote in May. There, I've said it. It's now official, and that's what my goal is. But I'm terrified that at some point on the journey between now and the 17th of May, that I start thinking negatively, and that the old negative thoughts about I'm not good enough might just creep in. That's what I'm most worried about.
Okay. So you're not worried about having to do an Ironman?
I'm not worried about doing the Ironman because it's my understanding that if I do the training, I will do the Ironman. Because I've done an Ironman, and it wasn't an easy Ironman. Now, I appreciate that this one's a more difficult Ironman with different variables that's going to make it very, very difficult physically and mentally. But I know if I do the training, I'll get through the Ironman. So my worry is, will I do the training to the same level, to the same commitment that I did the training the last time round? And will I actually follow through on my own advice, which is doing things this time that I didn't do the last time? Because whenever I think about it, I'm thinking like, holy shit, if I have to factor in weights into this and stretching and mobility, like I'm not going to have a fucking minute to myself. Do you know what I mean? So there's a sense of overwhelmed, but so I don't know if that all makes sense. It's all a bit gobbledygook.
Doesn't make sense yet, but it might by the end. No. Again, like you unless you haven't figured out, I do have a relaxed nature, but it's not always meant to make sense, Micky. Just to be clear now too, no, this is normal. I talk to a lot of athletes. What you're saying to me is normal, but you're saying a lot of positive things there. If you do this training, an initial thought coming here that the use of language is so important when it comes to mental skills. If you do this training, instead of when I do this training, but you've already told me that you are not worried about doing an Ironman. I've spoke to people that do endurance events, and they're worried about what it might be like, or if they're able to do it. So when you do your training, you will be able to achieve this Ironman. So I'm trying to narrow this down. You're worried about, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you're worried about the obstacles you might face between now and then that might knock you off your pattern or your routine or your structure.
Yeah.
Would that be fair enough to say?
I think that's pretty much it, Benny. It's the idea that I'm worried that an old mindset's creeping back in. Because the old me, I was the old me for 40 years, 45 years. This new and improved 21st century Micky Collins,
modern Micky,
is a very different bloke than the old me, and that's well known in my...
Yeah.
It's very well known just that I've made significant changes in my life. And as much as I'm trying to play to the new version of me, the old version of me was long well established, and those old belief systems and self-esteem and confidence issues and those things, whilst I'm trying to improve on them, and I am, they're still there. And it's about trying to move away from that, because I don't want that old self-defeatist or I'm not good enough. I don't want that mind. I don't want that creeping in. I don't want to pollute the potential that I have. And I'm not even sure that I understand what I can even achieve, because of that old mindset is nearly holding me back. I feel like it's a cloud or something that's just preventing me from really going for something. I don't actually know that I have it. So I'll always steer on the side of caution, and I think that's why I'm drawn to endurance, because I don't have to go wild fast, and I don't have to take big risks. I just have to keep putting one foot in the other, one pedal after another. I have to keep just doing that for a long time, because the thought of getting injured would set me back. What would I do if I...
Mike, I'm going to challenge a few
Sure.
of the things you were saying there. We refer to old Micky and modern Micky. I'm speaking to modern Micky now and old Micky. Let me tell you a bit of research I came across Tiger Woods, former sports psychologist, and this changed my approach to self-talk, which you're referring to, these thoughts of old Micky. Tiger Woods used to welcome negative self-talk.
Right.
Say he was approaching a golf shot, he was lining up to hit a shot, and a bit of doubt set in, or reset. He used to thank himself for thinking. He was like, "Whoa, thanks Tiger. I was going to scuff that shot. Now I'm going to step back. I might talk to my caddy. I'm going to reset. I'm going to approach the ball again." So he welcomed the negative thoughts. Now, I know we're being recorded and this is going out in public, but what I would suggest to you is, whenever these thoughts come from old Micky, is to tell old Micky to F off. Thanks, old Micky. But I would use it as fuel. Thank you for a reminder that I don't want to be old Micky.
Yes, okay.
I'm very much modern Micky.
Yes.
So I would be, thanks, but now you can F off. You've given me the fuel to put my trainers on and do me run. And you said it yourself there. You don't have to go a mad pace, you just have to show up. So I like to work with, maybe I wouldn't even say they're mantras, but maybe just sentences, or even shortening to wee trigger words or affirmations that you could use. And one I would use there is maybe FOE, focus on effort, or FOC, focus on consistency. And I think consistency would be jumping out here. FOC, focus on consistency. You showed me your training plan. If you were able to check that off and just do it, doesn't matter what intensity, what time, as long as you showed up and completed it, you're modern Micky. But if you missed a week of training, that's so Micky creeping in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
So I would just challenge you and to flip that, to welcome these thoughts from old Micky.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, thanks for the wee reminder there, old Micky. Now you can do one. You know, I'm modern Micky, and use that as your fuel.
Because it's an interesting flip, the mind flip, and I like it. I like it in the sense that because it also gives you an opportunity. It would give me an opportunity to remind myself who I used to be, and therefore he's the guy I need to protect myself from. So I don't want to be that person anymore. So I suppose there's an element of that, you know. So I in the moment where I have the negative thought, there's an opportunity for me to reflect about the difference and the improvements to who I am in the present, which is, as you say, and I'll be less polite than you, fuck you, old Micky.
You've got license to do that. So yeah, this certainly lends itself to my next point about thoughts, is to catch them. You even use that word yourself, to catch your thoughts and ask yourself, is this fact, or is it just the way I'm feeling today? You know, is there fact or fiction, or I go with fact or feel. So is this fact, or is this just the way I'm feeling? So for example, you say you trained 2 weeks in a row and then missed one session. Old Micky. You're not old Micky. You're just a normal bloke that missed a training session for whatever reason, or for whatever reason.
Yeah.
You know, so I would always get an athlete there to challenge those thoughts. Is this fact? I've never met old Micky, but I very much prefer modern. You know, from what you've told me. But there's no getting away from that. He's made who you are today, and you know, you need to embrace, probably isn't the right word, but acknowledge it and accept that. Yeah. You know, I'm who I am today because of
old Micky. Brought me along on a journey, like, and got me through a lot of shit. And I think that's probably something that we can all relate to, you know. And there's a protectiveness to be had whenever you are in a way of living or a way of existing for such a long period of time. There's an element of worry that whenever you drop this shield, that there's a vulnerability to be had, and you know, because I suppose the idea, I've never done this before, so this is weird for me, but I'm opening up the idea of nearly feeling that because I was so unhealthy and unfit, and now that I am fit and healthy, I still feel that I'm bullshitting in some sort of a strange way. I still feel that I'm kind of blagging it. I don't feel authentic in the new version of me, which is weird.
Well, Micky, there's again, this sort of just going off on another tangent now. I'm not sure if you've heard of imposter syndrome. So you're doubting yourself. I don't deserve to be an Ironman because I was so unhealthy. You know,
possibly.
How could I be an Ironman? Because I was unhealthy for 45 years. No, that's again just sort of reiterating what you were saying. But that's very common.
So that imposter syndrome can be within yourself.
Within yourself, and do you think I wasn't driving down the road here this evening going, why am I going on a podcast speaking to sports psychologists? There's so many other qualified people that could be talking to this man. But then you just maybe need to talk to your wife or someone who's, no, sure, look at all the work you do, and a wee reminder. You know, that's just a brief idea of it, and I'm going to give you a bit of sort of reassurance that it's common. You know, this imposter syndrome, and you know, I'm not sure of the exact research on it, but talking to more male athletes and coaches even, you know, they've got high profile gigs, continually doubting themselves. How did I get here? How did I get here? But people don't get places by fluke. You don't complete an Ironman by fluke. I know that much. You know. Yeah. You know, so again, sometimes you just need to say things out loud and get that sort of bit of reassurance from someone else. You know, so that's how I would bracket what you're feeling there, this imposter syndrome that, you know, modern Mickey, you're only unknown, and then I'm going to go back to being unhealthy Mickey. You know, but I would do a lot of work in like exercise psychology as well. You know, give me a brief outline of what old Mickey, give me a typical day's eating and lifestyle choices.
Well, Friday night old Mickey would have been KFC, 6 cans of beer, TV remote in the hand, chug my cans, go to my bed about 11:30, lie about, just very, very lazy. Well, just not physical. Like there was no exercise at all. Driving everywhere, no running, no swimming, no biking, nothing. Thinking that I was healthy because I didn't smoke anymore because I gave up the smokes whenever we had children. So thinking that I was reasonably healthy because I didn't smoke, but I would have smoked in the past. Would have drank beer at the weekends and just ate crap and just caught myself one day. I think it might have been a photograph or a reflection or something, and I just thought, Jesus Christ, Mickey, you have let yourself go, you know. But the realization then that, you know, I need to up my game here because my lads are gonna probably end up copying me in some way. So I have to give them a better template to copy, and maybe, you know, I think it was my boys that give me the kick up the ass. And thankfully my wife backed me on that and was very supportive around that. So I would have been doing nothing. Like I would have got a taxi home, like, you know, I wouldn't have walked anywhere, I wouldn't have walked the length of myself. The first day I decided to go running, I bought a pair of trainers, and anybody that knows Loch McCrory walk, I started at the slipway and I got to the second picnic table and I thought I was having a heart attack. I thought I was goner. I thought I was sent for like proper pain, like unbelievably unfit, like ridiculously unfit, and never played football, wasn't involved in football teams. Whenever I was at the Brothers and everybody was playing Gaelic at PE, I was doing the high jump and smoking fags. I might go to the Mary Peters track as an under 13 or under 14 high jump Ulster championships, and me and a mate were smoking fags in between the jumps, like ridiculous. So that's from Iron Maiden to Iron Man. That's where it comes from nothing to full on, sort of.
Would it be fair to say you got a wee bit more animated than when you were discussing about old Mickey there?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're disgusted by talking through that there.
Yeah. There's a bit of guilt because of what I missed, and a wee bit of shame. Not so much. I don't know. He's not the guy I want to be. I don't like.
The point I'm trying to get to here now, Mickey, is that I can nearly tell from that reaction that you wouldn't let yourself become old Mickey.
No.
Which, coming back to, which is probably maybe 15, 20 minutes ago now, you're telling me one of your main concerns was that old Mickey will come out again.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll not complete your training. And you'll not have it in the bank to complete the Ironman. And just the building that, and maybe not necessarily close off this section, but I would still welcome the old Mickey thoughts and get that wee bit animated. And as you said it there, thanks old Mickey, but now you can F off. You know?
And I suppose this is where I'm in live time beginning to see the benefits of chatting to someone like yourself, because I don't chat to people about myself. I try and suss out this shit by myself, for myself.
Shadowboxing in front of the mirror.
That's exactly it, pretty much. And just then, whenever, and you've already used the phrase saying it out loud, whenever I'm hearing myself talk it out loud, so you typically won't do that by yourself, otherwise people will have you sent for the GP. But talking it out and then having it reflected back from a different angle has given me the opportunity to say, I'm agreeing with what you're saying there. I'm not going to let that old guy come back. Absolutely not. Not a hope.
So that's where, if you remember back to the start of a conversation there, every sport's different and every individual's different. I didn't know we were going to be chatting about this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Aye.
But my sort of pathway, I would have a flow diagram of, right, do we go here with this? Do we go here with this? And we got you to accept that, look, this is going to happen. And then we put a strategy in place. We normalise it.
Yeah.
And then hopefully, whenever this does come up again, it works. And when I was talking about sort of building up your sets and reps of mental skills, you may not have all the answers straight away. You know, I can still see you coming out of the drive-thru in KFC some evening.
Oh,
me going behind you. No, no, but that's okay.
Oh, aye.
But I know now that would be a short-term blip if it did happen. Because I could nearly tell just by your reaction there. And I'm not a psychic, but you were animated and disgusted and shamed. You know, again, these are your words that maybe you were using. So the fear and the worry is very much real of old Micky hindering you. But I would like you just to sort of welcome him and thank him for them thoughts, and then moving on with modern Micky.
So you're kind of showing yourself that is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah.
You know, athletes tend to have what's called a recency bias. We all have it. That's in everyday life. You know, you're only as good as your last training session. You're only as good as your last match. You're only as good as that's terrible training today. I'm a terrible athlete. You know, you tend to only think about what you've done recently, but you need. This is where I would sort of try and think or use for a useful intervention for building confidence in athletes is to think of having like an evidence bank. And that could look like many things. It could look at all the training sessions you've completed. It could look at all the previous events. You know, you spoke about Cork. You know, I'm sure there's others. You need to have this evidence bank that for when these moments of self-doubt or temptation or whatever might happen, you don't fall victim to this recency bias where, back to being old Micky with my KFC, my 6 cans. That's not who you are now. That's just the recency bias kicking in. You thinking, you know, you're not this Iron Man. Whereas you got to think of the evidence bank that you've built up and all your successes. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, it totally does.
And a really powerful tool that I would do with athletes is get them to write down their accomplishments. It could be a top 3, it could be a top 5, it could be a top 10 of significance, and have it at hand. So for when them moments of self-doubt you go, look at it and I've achieved this. Or it could be your completed training plan.
Yeah.
You know, for example, there in the gym, and I just do this myself, and I know some of my gym clients do this, of a diary, just a typical week review diary. I write in all my training sessions, and if I think, I haven't been training well, but if I look back the last few weeks, I see all my training sessions there. You know, I have a very high ceiling. I set myself high standards, and that's fine. But you don't need to beat yourself up if you're not at the ceiling either.
If you fall short.
But sometimes you just have that evidence bank of, you know, I've put this in. I'm doing all right. I'm trying to keep a family going. I'm recently turned 40. I've got a couple of jobs going. Do you know what I mean? It's not easy. It's not easy. And a KFC and a bag of cans sounds epic, Micky. I'm out of the world. No, it's important to realise that people put people on pedestals and they're like, I can't be doing that there. But
You can.
Have the bag of chips. It's, it's different if you're, as I say, like you're at that very, very top level and you can't. But then, they still have their pizzas post meals. If you see some of the post meals that the Premier League footballers have, it's part of what they're doing. So sometimes I find work, because I do work with elite athletes and I do work with local athletes, and people just are so strict with themselves. They don't let themselves enjoy it.
Aye.
So just be wary of that too. Now, I'm not telling you to go and have your kids. You do what you want to do if it's your training. But I'm just saying, don't beat yourself up if that does happen. And be assured that I don't think, Micky's coming back to play. Very much modern Micky.
Yeah.
Would that be fair to say?
No, it makes sense. It does. One of the things that I'll do is I've actually a couple of wee strategies that I do, and now I'm aware of why I'm doing them. So, like, I have my medals beside my bed on the wall, and I see that every morning I get up, and it's just nice to remind myself that this is who I am. And I've got a countdown app on my phone that keeps a track of what I'm working towards. There's never just one thing on it. There's always other things, and there's also life events that are on it as well. So I'm always future planning. And sometimes I'll just look at Strava. I'll just look back and think, Christ, I did 3 runs this week. I might be thinking, fuck's sake, not doing enough. But then I look at Strava and go, I was running 3 times. In the last 7 days, I ran 3 times, and I was on the bike and I did a swim. So in the last 7 days, I've actually exercised 5 times. Dry your eyes, so I will try, but it's funny how you just get into these wee sort of mental ruts. But these are wee tools that we're talking about now that can help us overcome them.
That's it. I picked up a saying there a few weeks ago, preparing for a bit of leadership and organisational behaviour work. But it's not what you're looking at; it's what you see. So you could be looking at your training diary and thinking, or you could be looking at, I haven't done this. But what do you see in that? And then if the further you look into it, you actually see that you've done 5 training sessions. And, so it's not always what you're looking at, it's what you see. I always thought that was quite deep. Can't remember where I quote. It was an older quote. I thought it was quite. It was about looking at an athlete with low confidence. And someone might go and say they must place the pass, or and fans are shouting. They just see someone that didn't perform a pass or a shot at goal, or they didn't see, or they're only seeing what they want to see. They don't see that what's actually going on there. I'm surely someone playing a sport can perform that skill, whatever it might be. But maybe that's just the sports psychologist for me. I'm looking at what's actually going on there. I was trying to maybe strip that apart then, so and then sort of following on to a bit about opportunity. I heard this one actually too, and it's maybe going a wee bit off topic, but it was about 2 salesmen. And I know we're not here talking about sales or anything, but there's 2 salesmen, and they live in the same city, and there's a horrific storm outside. First salesman wakes up, looks out the window, and he goes, "Holy moly, what a storm. I'm not going to make any sales today. Come back to bed." Second salesman wakes up, looks out the window, "Whoa, what a storm. Perfect day to make sales, because all the other salesmen are going to be laying in their bed."
Yeah.
So it's not what you're looking at, it's what you see. So the opportunity was there. And I thought that was quite good. And you could obviously, maybe make it more appropriate to a sports setting or something like that. But I picked that one up the other day too. So it's, there's opportunity there wherever. You might not always see it. You just need to look a wee bit deeper on that.
I think it's also worthwhile to look and see where you've come and how far you've come as well. And it's something that I try and do every so often. And I find that sometimes you might think, I'm not running as fast as I was running last year. But then whenever you look at what I'm doing now, I'm not doing it to run faster. I'm doing what I'm doing now so that I can run longer. Distance-wise, I'm not interested in banging out a 20-minute 5K. I couldn't think of anything worse, to be perfectly honest, but I need to be able to bang out 20 miles.
You're saying things here without putting a label on it again, Micky, and it's perfect. You got to look at the volume that you're doing. There's so many components to make up the demands of a sport or an event. You've got the volume, intensity, the type of it, the time of it, how often you need to do it. Your main priority is focusing on consistency, FOC. Focus on that consistency, the volume, and the time. There's no getting away from the time that's dedicated to running the miles or swimming the lengths or whatever it might be, or getting out on the bike. So that's your focus.
Yeah.
Intensity doesn't need to come into it. Now, you need to be doing it at a certain intensity to get out of first gear, I'm sure, but you don't need to be blitzing out.
Yeah.
And so, focusing on consistency, showing up, and by getting the volume in, and I'm putting the time in, and that's going to get you over the line.
I'm going to give a wee shout out to Jared Turbot. I spoke to many people before I did my first Ironman, and it was Jared who very, very early on gave me a nugget of advice, which was consistency is key. And it resonated with me because he said to me, if you can hit upwards of over 80%, if you can achieve 80% of what you have on paper, you'll finish the Ironman. And that was backed up then by other people that I spoke to, Sean Healy and Peter Skeffington and Shane McGill and various different other men and ladies that had completed these long distance races, and they all said the same thing: consistency, showing up, turning up, doing it. And I think that's in triathlon, for long distance triathlons, probably the best advice I've ever got in my life.
Repetition is a skill.
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of like a cousin of what you're trying to say, or what Jared was saying. Repetition is a skill. Some people struggle to do the same thing over and over and over again, but that's only how you master something. Doing that same swim, and then perhaps we could lend that back to the imagery or visualization I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You can practice your swim stroke. You can practice your cycle, your transitions. Now, I didn't need to mention this disclaimer at the start. If you didn't know how to swim and you just thought about swimming, you wouldn't be able to. Just for any listeners out there, Benny says, I know how to swim. This is about,
just imagine
honing a skill. Just a disclaimer there. I don't want that.
I'm going to lend my support to that disclaimer as well.
But repetition is a skill, and it comes back to that imagery and visualization. Because I was speaking to you about volume and time there, Micky. Busy people don't have the time. And again, I compared a professional athlete in 300 grand a week and playing in front of millions, the challenges they face. Boo-hoo. And then challenges of keeping a family going, working multiple jobs, trying to fit in training for an Ironman. What's more challenging there?
Yeah.
When you got talking about injuries, I'm sure there's some sort of, I can't remember the last time I wasn't injured, even from a young age. You're always trying something. So that presents its own sort of challenges to being able to perform a skill. But you can sit there and you can visualise it and you can practice. Your turns in the pool. I know in Ironman, obviously, you're in open water, but they're just sort of things that are coming to mind. Working with athletes in the visualisation. Practicing that goal shot, practicing that free kick. Practicing in your mind, thousands of times, and then it's not such a shock then. Repetition's a skill.
I know that I'm taking this with me. I'm taking that visualization piece with me, and I'm going to lock that in and begin that loop, begin that mental rehearsal. I think that's great. That's a fantastic wee thing to be able to do.
Yeah, we could probably do our own podcast on that, Micky. But the key thing with visualization and imagery is that you try and incorporate as many senses as possible. For example, it just sounds bizarre, but there's a study I was reading for relevant to the golfers, that there was a study done on a group of golfers who just practiced their visualization sitting in the chair like we are now, or they put on their typical golf attire. They went and stood in grass. They they held their clubs. They visualised, what it was as close to actual golf shots as possible, and that proved to be more beneficial. But then there's the whole argument that, well, why not just practice the golf shot? Why not play? But you got to factor in like fatigue levels and things like that. Things are only daft if you give them a go and don't think they work. So, for example, if you were trying to practice an open water swim and use visualization, you need to be in a cold bath. You need to be in cold water. There's no point doing it in a hot bath or a nice cozy bed.
Aye. And I suppose the other thing that you shouldn't be doing is thinking, well, it's too cold to go for a swim today, so what I'm going to do is just visualise it, sure, and that'll be the same thing.
Well, what we don't want is to encourage cop-outs, So.
I was listening to that point, Micky calls was chatting it, and as long as I just think about it, then I'll be alright.
But I guess if you just didn't fancy it that day, it would be more beneficial to do the imagery. You just made me think of so my brother actually he's an international ice swimmer, and it was he lives down in Donegal. You mentioned Rossnoola, he lives in Rossnoola, and he does an open water swim every day. Doesn't matter what the temperature is. And a few weeks ago it was his birthday, and the next morning he was going for his daily swim, and he says, "Come on, Mum." I normally do go with him, but it was Baltic, and I was just like, "No." And he's like, "Why not?" And I didn't have an answer for him. So his daughter and our niece all went in as well, so it's kind of like, well, I have to go now, but it felt great after it, but it was just why not? And I took it on a sports psychology level. I don't have an answer. I do have an answer. Faith, I was scared, and there was some choice words said that day, Micky, but I was glad I got in then, I said, like, hey, I don't mind the water very much, but it was freezing, and it was only a few weeks ago, so I was glad after, but it was just, why not? Why do you not want to do it?
And if you can't come up with a reason, then it sort of leaves you nowhere to go other than I have to.
Yeah, I'm right. I said, no, I give most things a go. Like I said, when I'm normally down there, I do normally go and get on the water, but it was just I didn't have a reason for not doing it. He's just looking at me, why not? And then, so there you go. You don't need a master's in sports psychology sometimes, you just need to be called out by someone, So.
Benny, what do you think, or how would you go about helping someone like me who decided that they wanted to bring their performance to the next level? So if we just focused on triathlon at the minute, I'm a part-time triathlete, full-time dad, full-time job. I'm never gonna represent Ireland in the Olympics or anything like that. But what would I need to do, or how would I be able to improve myself or my mindset? What could sports psychology, or how could sports psychology help me to bring my racing to the next level, where I would be knocking on the door of a podium, for example, from maybe I finished 19th or 20th, for example, this year in a half distance race. So how could sports psychology help me bring that up to top 10?
So, I was just scrolling a few notes there, Micky. And you can nearly answered a few of my first thoughts. You talk about the next level. We need to clearly distinguish what the next level looks like. Mm-hmm. And you spoke about a few things there, finishing higher and podiums and things like that there. I wouldn't want to, first of all, put that pressure on you and finish them on a podium. Mm-hmm. It's okay to have them goals, but we would need to strip that back to what are the lifestyle choices, what are the behaviours, what are the processes, what does the next level look like, but then what's required, mm-hmm. and what support you need to get there then. And the support could look like many things, and I don't mean sports psychology. It could be from a high-end coach. What support at home? Is there any support from work? How much time are you going to dedicate? Then you need to look at your own times and how do you improve them times.
Aye.
when you talk about podiums and higher placed finishes, they're outcome goals. We need to focus on the processes and the behaviours and the lifestyle choices, things that are in your control. You could train your ass off, beat your times, and still finish 19th.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was 18 stronger competitors there.
Aye.
That's not in your control. Would you be happy at that? Would you be content if you beat your time but still finished in the same position?
Aye.
And that's... You don't seem overly keen. That's not what I want.
I'm actually... My face probably didn't demonstrate what was...
That's not the answer I wanted.
Because I'm actually caught up thinking about what I actually asked, and what your response has made me really, really think about that. And I think it's probably something that a lot of people might find themselves thinking. I'd love to do this. I'd love to get that. And maybe it's actually not achievable because of all the other things. It may well be achievable, but it's probably more realistic for me to work on what you've suggested in terms of improving my times and then see where I fall within the fields around me, because that's all I can control. And you're quite right. I may never...
I didn't want to kill your buzz.
But it makes much, much more sense. And it takes a fucking lot of pressure off myself now thinking. If I can think in that way, then I read a book called The Happiness Trap, which talks about when we pin our hopes and aspirations on something, we need to be very careful that the thing that we've chosen that represents our happiness is something that we can actually achieve. Because the more we attempt to tick off the box, or that, for example, the podium, and the longer it takes, and the consistent failure to achieve the podium results only in negative feelings and unhappiness. So it's a happiness trap whenever we pitch something that's beyond our capabilities, which then ironically makes us feel even more shit. So it reinforces how rubbish we might feel. So stripping it back, like what you've said there, and looking at times and looking at that progressive piece is much, much more sensible.
And this is a common conversation that we'll have with athletes, even not from a sports psychology setting. And people kind of roll their eyes up when you talk about goal setting. Especially working with the students and talking about sports psychology, setting goals. Be a Premier League footballer, right? What does that look like? Strip it back. How many Premier League footballers are there? How many footballers are there? What's the when you look, first of all, you need a reality check.
Aye.
Is it achievable? It's one of the key things about goals, like you were saying, that happiness trap. Again, I'm buzzkill here for everyone. But, it's important just to have a reality check of what is achievable. And it might be achievable, of course, because, you put the work in. But if the goal is outcome-based, you're only setting yourself up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
How many people take part and there's only 3 podium spots?
Yeah. Do the math.
Yeah. And look, if you were to get in the podium, you'd be like, Benny, look at me, I got in the podium. You told me, no, you told me in that podcast I wouldn't do it. I was like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I says it would be great. But you need to focus on your times, things that you can control. What's my average, pace per mile? What time do I need to do my swimming? What time do I need to do this in?
Mm-hmm.
You know better than me and Ironman. Whoever the top 3 favourites are, they could be way ahead of you in the swim, but your bike's stronger, and having that confidence and faith in yourself that you're going to claw that back, because one of the endurance events and long distance events, one of the benefits is that if you perform and you run at a certain speed, you've got a confidence that you'll win, or and that comes as a byproduct of you achieving the times that you work towards by completing all the sessions, living the proper lifestyle, and controlling the processes.
Mm-hmm.
Trusting your stroke, trusting your transition, trusting your pace, your breathing, that you feel that you've got that evidence back. Trust in that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah.
And the podiums will take care of itself. It's a bit of a land on the, a book there by Paul Walsh. Is it The Score Will Take Care of Itself? He coached the 49ers. Great book on it. The score will take care of itself. That's about looking at the group behaviours of 49ers. They were absolute ruins. He came in and it left me now. But they looked at the organisational structure, the team behaviours, built up the trust. Who they needed in what positions and who's going to lead it. And if they got all the processes right, the score will take care of itself. So the podium will take care of itself if you identify what times are needed, what processes are needed, what behaviours are needed, and then how do you get there.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put the pressure on yourself saying I need to. It'd be like, if I follow all these behaviours and processes,
that sounds perfect. It reminds me of a previous podcast with Peter Skeffington, who was talking about training for an Ironman, and he said something along the lines of whatever you put in will come out on the day. So your body will give you the time. The time that you get on the event will be representative of the time that you put in the lead up to the event. So what's in your body will come out of your body. So you've got to make sure that you're putting it in. And again, that was reinforcing the consistency piece.
Can't look at Ironman.
No, but it's just I think it's a valuable discussion because it's very, very easy for us to get caught up in these dreams, and I'd love to do this and I'd love to do that, and we're always looking to fast track to the glory, and we need to maybe stop and spend more time celebrating those PBs, those little victories, those little incremental enhancements as such.
Just as you mentioned that, Micky, you heard me talking about this evidence bank that all athletes should have. Every time you reach a milestone or a goal, it needs to be stored, and you need to, have that there to dive into. If self-doubt arrives, which happens on an hourly basis, on a minute by minute sometimes, you've got that evidence bank to dive into. And a problem that I find now with goal setting is that when athletes reach a goal, right, what's next? They nearly forget or they don't acknowledge that they achieved, celebrate the wins. And a goal could be completing your training plan for this month, for this week, for this day, showing up, right, give yourself a wee pat on the back. Well done, Micky. That's in the bank. That's in your bank. Goal setting can be as simple as that, but sometimes the most simple things can be the most effective.
Just ticking them off. Just
tick it off.
Ticking them off on a calendar, even just putting a wee X to it. Done. And then over time, you're seeing all the red X's on your calendar. You think like bang, bang, bang. Lovely. Yeah. Visual. Yeah.
Too many athletes get caught up. I need a medal. And Now, I don't mind competition. I think competition's great because it brings the best out in an athlete. No. Now, what competition looks like is different for everyone. That's not to be hypocritical. No. It's great. I love training winners. But it depends what your reasons are for, what's your why? Are you doing an Ironman in Lanzarote to win it? Or to do it?
To do it.
So,
absolutely.
So again, not to kill your buzz, but don't lose track of that.
Oh, no, I'm very, very aware of that.
Again, like if I was to be coaching you for that, I don't know what it looks like, but going from where you are now to win it, I don't know what the specific demands are, but you need to stop everything else in your life and dedicate it to winning that Ironman in Lanzarote. Would that be a fair enough assumption?
Well, you would need everybody else to be taken out in a tsunami if you're waiting for me to win it.
No, but again,
yes, and I take your point. It would be a phenomenal lifestyle. You'd have to give up your work, your family, your hobbies, your everything. Would need to be complete and total, utter, obsessive dedication, relentless.
And then you come first in that Ironman Lanzarote, and then everyone you've left behind isn't. Well done, Micky. You know what I mean? And the point I'm trying to make is there's other things at play.
Yes.
You know, that you just need to acknowledge. And again, I'm not trying to kill any buzz. It's just having that reality check, because you need your identity in sport and exercise and outside of it as well.
Absolutely. The world batters on, whether you turn up or not.
That's it.
You know, and your role within your own family, within your work, within your systems, your groups, all those things are all part and parcel of who we are. And I suppose it's a valuable point. We're not just athletes, you know.
That's it. You know, and as important as it is, you know, if we're to split you into another subconscious, you've got Ironman Micky and you've got Everyday Micky. You know, and for the percentage of your time, you're Everyday Micky.
I'm everyday.
And that's who you are, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, but sport's great. It gives you this other identity, this Ironman Micky. You know, that's great. Yeah. But it's just making sure that you're aware of those things are important, if not more important, of who you are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Just to be aware of that too.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Ben, I don't know that we should delve any deeper, because I want people to reach out to you themselves, and I'm sure this conversation will have hopefully opened up some thoughts for people. What's the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they wanted some advice or if they wanted to reach out with you? And the other thing I wanted to say was, is it individuals, or would you do clubs, or is it teams, or a bit of everything?
A bit of everything, Micky. Things kind of work kind of finds it its way to me. Like, I haven't really put myself out there as a sports psychologist. I've kind of been falling into it through word of mouth. And for example, you know, as I said, Kelly there, getting me in with Swim Ireland, but I've put out to, say, local clubs, like golf clubs and whatever, about doing workshops. So I do workshops to like a setting to bring people together. As I mentioned, like, I'm trying to make this accessible to people. You know, so one of the ways of that is to bring people together, rather, you know, because people don't maybe want to take the jump at one-to-ones. You know, some people do. So that's sort of what I'm trying there at the minute. No groups getting me in. So I've been fortunate enough. You know, golf clubs have got me in, swim clubs have got me in. But I've also worked with, you know, as I said, rugby clubs and Gaelic teams. You know, so I've worked in that setting. Individual athletes I've worked with, and it's kind of stemmed off my strength conditioning and my physical preparation. You know, so again, that's holding. Whenever you're training someone in the gym, you kind of I find it hard not to take on the sports psychology. You know, you're talking about goals, you're talking about the reasons why and things like that. But you know, so there's the one-to-ones, and I would answer your question. So there's workshops, there's one-to-ones, and they're either done online or in person, and people can get me through my page there on social media. It's benefit. That's we play the word benefit. The amount of times do you mean benefit? The benefit of physical and mental skills. You know, so I haven't really put myself out there as a sports psychologist. Purely because there's a confidential nature to it, but it's one of my intentions to get the website up and running and publish it a wee bit more, you know. So this here certainly helps too. But if people are interested in following up on this, they can contact, you know, if they've got direct contact with yourself, Micky, or you know, and direct them to my page.
Yeah, I'll be putting a wee link in the description straight to your Instagram page, so anybody can follow that. If they want to. Always like to finish off a podcast by looking into the future. I suppose I'll be looking towards Lanzarote Ironman in May. I'm going to take some of your tips on board. I'm going to really think about that. And I might get in touch with you actually after the pod.
Just a point on that, Micky, sorry for butting on there, is I meant to mention that starting off the points or the mental skills training, you know, I talked about the sets and reps and just starting. Because you might just do so little of it to start, you might not see the benefit initially. I've done visualisation there for 2 minutes. That didn't do anything. Nobody doesn't know what he's talking about. But you need to keep at it. You might get benefit from doing 2 minutes. But it's getting that balance right between not overwhelming yourself, but giving it a go and just trust that it will work.
Yes.
You know, so you may not see the benefits initially, but it will come. And the worst time to start practicing would be when the wave hits your face in the water. What was it that boy Benny was saying again? Or sorry, The worst time to start would be never. The second worst time to start would be when you're in the water and panic is setting.
Yeah.
What was that by Benny said again about your visualisation, and then the arms and legs are kicking you. But no, so just to be aware of that as well. You know. Cool. So yeah.
What about your own sports? Your own goals and your own future? Anything in the pipeline for yourself? Just with your own PTing or your own strength work or anything like that coming up?
Yeah, well, Micky, my main role, occupation, I suppose, is in Southwest College there. I've been there since 2010, so I'm a lecturer, and I'm actually, we've got a new role as a curriculum manager there as well. So
very good. I've
got good changes happening there, but I've always had an interest in sport outside of that, and that's now working towards sports psychology, the last number of years. I'm just trying to build that up. So I always like having a sort of balance inside and outside of work. I don't always call this work. And I'm really enjoying it, especially since having to retire from participating in sport. I had a bad back injury a few years ago, and unfortunately just had to retire. And it was at a decent level. Never necessarily the best player or footballer. But I knew what I had to do to get to where I wanted to be. I done all right for myself. But I really struggled with having to retire. And, like we spoke about identity as an athlete. 2 or 3 years ago, I was Benny McDevitt. I was playing Aussie rules for Ireland. I was going to Australia. Now all of a sudden that stops. But then to go back to a few of my points I was mentioning there, I'm a father. I've got 2 girls at home, another baby on the way next year, a wife at home. That's my identity now, and I've worked hard to get there. So I have to practice what I preach. I'm much more than Benny McDevitt, former athlete. I'm much more than Benny McDevitt, sports psychologist. I have an identity at home now.
Yes.
And again, not to delve into my own sort of consultancy here, but I had a bad back injury. I was lying on my back. I wasn't able to help around the house. We just moved house. I was trying to finish my masters at the time, actually. What else was going on? One of the babies just arrived. Leah just arrived, and Michaela running around like a mad woman. And I wasn't able to fulfill my duty as that. Yeah. And I was struggling with not being an athlete anymore. So I had to nearly just draw a line. So to answer your question, from participating in sport, I like to keep myself healthy. I still like to train. I dabble with different things. I do a bit of boxing training. I try a bit of Muay Thai there. Again, I like to throw myself out there and challenge myself. I do a lot of the things that you said you did, like doing like mobility and striking. But that's maybe because of the back injury. It was so bad. I need to look after myself on that front. So as from a competition point of view, I'm okay to have checked out. I was managing a couple of Gaelic teams the last couple of years. I got my competitive edge from that. Also maybe fix of stress as well. So yeah, stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. It fuels you, but it's about being able to manage it. But where I'm at now, I'm very much just starting my new role in college, trying to establish myself as a sports psychologist, and just waiting for our new arrival to make it three in the house then, so we'll see how that goes. I think we're enough on, Micky.
I think your hands will be well full. Another baby on the way, which is it's just a lovely thing to be blessed with another child. So you can't ask for any more than that.
But what I do know is that I want to be able to carry them on my shoulders. I want to be able to push them in the swings. I want to be able to, and I want to be able to absolutely dominate them when they grow up in whatever sport they choose. And any potential boyfriends that come.
Yes.
I want them
alpha dad.
I want them, not that I would kick their ass, but I want them to think that I could.
That's right.
So that there, that there's come out of, I'm always thinking that I want to be able to dominate them. If we're running up a hill, that's sports day, and any potential boys come to. I always think of that scene in Bad Boys 2, you remember that? Reggie comes to the door, But anyway, we're going off topic now.
I think maybe you should visualise doing your Clint Eastwood Claire for these boyfriends coming.
Shotgun loaded.
Benny, thanks very much, hey, for coming on the podcast. I really, really enjoyed
Thanks for having me.
that chat. It was wild interesting. A lot of food for thought.
The thing about sports psychology, Micky, is that we could probably do a whole series on this, and you can go down the rabbit hole and you get caught up in it a bit. So maybe we did try and discuss too much, but hopefully give a bit of a flavour on what it might look like. And we discussed quite a bit. If I was to have a consultancy with you, not for a podcast, say, we might have just stayed on one part and focused on it and really stripped it down and toward a part a wee bit more, or we might not have. It might have just been exactly how it was, so yeah.
No, listen, thanks very much for sharing that, and appreciate your sportsmanship in taking part, and just all the very best.
Yeah, thank you.